All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Grand Forks Growth Fund Committee meeting for November 12th. We'll begin with roll call, please.
Berg.
Here.
Crary.
Here.
Friedhoffs.
Here.
Holf. Ozowski.
Here.
Whitney.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. All right, so item number 2, minutes for September 30th, 2024. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
I move approval.
Second.
Yeah, call for a vote.
Are we going down the line or are we good?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign.
Thank you, Chairman Friedhoffs, members of the Growth Fund Committee, Kevin Hatcher, Business Development Manager at the Grand Forks Region EDC, speaking on behalf of the 96,307 FlexPace request here for Acme Tools. A background with the company, Acme Tools, they're a locally family-owned business operated here in the Grand Forks region, providing products and services for building, remodeling, woodworking, and those type of services and tools for those type of companies. The company is a leading authorized online retailer of those tools and equipment in 50 states through their e-commerce platform here. Just a little bit of a historical context with Acme Tools. Acme has been in front of the Growth Fund and JDA for a couple of FlexPace and Pace occasions, specifically out at the business park, and originally developing this e-commerce platform that really took a significant growth during the pandemic time here. So for this project in particular, Acme Tools is looking to improve their e-commerce platform even further with their infrastructure. That includes the hardware, software, network supporting Acme Tools platform, and this is for specifically the smart management, order management integration, the Service Cloud platform in itself. The project will improve technological improvements at the distribution center here in Grand Forks, improving the inventory tracking, enhancing the warehouse management system here, having that ability to improve the orders more efficiently over in the center there, reducing fulfillment times, and on the overall operational standpoint of the efficiency out at the distribution center, the e-commerce there. As a company as a whole, the company currently consists of 665 employees with plans to hire 90 additional. Here in Grand Forks, especially in the e-commerce, the distribution area, they're looking to increase that facility over there for an additional 20 full-time employees there. For the project in itself, the FlexPace financing details, we're looking at a $3,390,000 project. FlexPace subsidy is going to be utilized to buy the interest rate down from 6% to 3% on a $3,390,000 note from Wells Fargo for that e-commerce software integration over at the distribution center. As I mentioned, we're asking the Growth Fund here for $96,307 locally to leverage a loan to leverage Bank of North Dakota's grant portion of $178,856. The FlexPace here locally, it's going to be deferred for 60 months, followed by 12 equal monthly installments for the request here. As you can see in the staff report, we're looking at a loan to value on the property, or loan to value on this request at 100%. Reason being is we're going to be secured through a corporate guarantee. Not only that through Acme Tools, but also a direct collateral guarantee in the form of a CD designated for this loan request. So basically getting a cash collateral tied to this request here for that full amount. So So we're looking at the request for the $96,307, and I open the floor for any questions here.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. Are there any questions?
So they are still locally owned and operated, right?
Yep, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
First, disclose to the group that through my role at Alaris, I have a potential conflict with this group. However, we're not involved in the transaction, and I would be willing to discuss and vote if the committee would want me to. But I'm just disclosing that fact that I have a potential conflict.
I motion that Mr. Wolf cannot vote.
Right. So,
So the motion to vote, and then we vote against it?
Sure, however you want to do it. It doesn't
Or
matter
you
to
do
me.
it in the negative like
Yeah.
she's doing, and then
right, and then you.
we vote it down
I think you
as a
have to vote
no.
in negative, and then you vote against it.
Yeah.
Right. So then I would second Mrs. Houseke's.
Yeah,
So then nobody would vote in favor, we'd all vote against.
you all vote against,
That's-
if that's what
if you
you're,
want
if
to
that's
do
your
it.
so
Yeah.
choice.
All right, so the motion is to not allow Mr. Wolf to vote. That's correct. For this item. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
And I means what?
So,
And an aye would mean that Mr. Wolf cannot vote, and a nay would give Mr. Wolf the ability to vote.
Right. All right, should we do it through roll call? Through go-around?
Aye.
Berg?
I apologize. Can you help me understand the negative, which aye and which is nay again?
So with this motion, if you vote yay or in the affirmative, Mr. Wolf cannot vote on this motion. If you vote nay and no, then Mr. Wolf can vote on the motion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nay.
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 The motion fails. Sorry, it's confusing. All
I
right.
do have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
And so, well, one, obviously Acme's been here numerous times. It's great. It's great that they're continuing to invest in the community. Great that they're continuing to increase their workforce. I mean, I think that's awesome. This is more for Mr. Conlon, and maybe to refresh my memory. Do we ever we didn't put a cap on what total we can do for flex pace for one individual entity, did we? I just want to make sure we're not butting up against that.
No, we
Okay.
did not.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I know in years past that dialogue's been discussed, so I just want to make sure we didn't violate any policy there. But yeah, I think it's great. I would move approval.
I second.
Before we vote, could I ask one question? Because I think I know the answer, but so Acme Motor is the borrower in this case of the PACE loan?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so they're on the note,
Yep.
and so there's no personal guarantee, but instead of a personal guarantee, we are getting a CD as cash collateral for the duration of the loan, securing this in exchange for no personal guarantee. So it's a cash secured loan.
Yep, that's correct, Mr. Wolf.
Okay, very good. So thank you. I just wanted to clarify that, and yeah, I'm certainly comfortable with that structure.
All right, do we have a motion?
Motion and seconded.
Okay. So wait, who made the motion?
Made motion, Osowski, second.
All right. All right. All right. Is there any more discussion? Do I need to open up the public forum for this one as well?
No, you don't need to at the Growth Fund Committee.
Okay. So seeing no more discussion, the motion to do the FlexPace loan request for Acme Tools. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. This motion passes.
Thank you.
And number 4, temporary construction easement at the Hive.
Thank you, Chair. On this project, the City of Grand Forks has been working with the NDDOT on, as we've updated our streets in the downtown, we're now on to North 4th Street from First Avenue to 2nd. City Council recently approved this project moving forward. As part of that, we were contacted as the owners of the property, former Herald Building, the Hive, and they're looking for temporary construction easements. So this motion is to allow the appropriate JDA officials, recommending them to approve those temporary construction easements. The reason is the building looks like it's flush with the property line, but 1 to 2 feet off, and to pour the forms and things for the sidewalk, they need to have access. So it's just temporary construction easement.
Move approval.
I second.
Right, first by Claire, second by Ozowski. Are there any questions? Right. Seeing, let's see, don't need to open public. All right, so the motion to approve the temporary construction easements for the Hive. And seeing no more discussion, the motion to do this, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. This motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Friedhoff, members of the Growth Fund Committee. You'll recall about, 18 months ago, this body approved a 18-month or a lease with Thread, or Air Autonomy Inc., doing business as Thread, for EDA fit-up space at the Hive, approximately 2,000, just over 2,000 square feet of leasable space at the Hive. The original term approved was an 18-month term, with a 18-month renewal option in there as well, up to a 36-month maximum, which is the standard for the, or the limit for the EDA funded space at the Hive. What we're looking for today is hopefully fairly administrative in that it's the exercising that 18-month renewal option. And as part of this, as staff, we're just asking to update the lease addendum as well, which justifies the rent discount that they receive as a startup entity in the Hive. So all that lease addendum update is attached to your staff report, but it's just outlining their contributions or expected contributions to the programming that justifies that discount, as well as reflects the programming realities we have now at the Hive. So happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Conlon?
I motion to approve.
Second.
All right, a first from Ms. Berg and a second from Ms. Whitney. All right. Seeing no more discussion, the motion to reinstate the Thread lease at the Hive. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. This motion passes.
Number 6, purchase agreement termination.
Thank you, Chair Friedolfs, member of the committee. This item is an item came to you last spring, or most of you, not everybody was on this committee at that time, but we worked with Kringley Investments. They were interested in a lot at the business park, and we entered into an agreement on a little over a 4-acre lot they were interested in building on, and they've since found another spot, which we're happy to hear. And in this case, they're going to move on. They're going to terminate the purchase agreement that we had with them. And in this case, following the purchase agreement, the earnest money stays with us. And so we are recommending that as we look through that purchase agreement as part of the termination, is that would stay with us. But we do think it's a bit of unfortunate that we're not selling a lot, but we are happy to see that they're staying in town and have found a location that works for them. So we do think it's a bit of good news at the same time. So with that, we are recommending approval, but I'm happy to stand for any questions.
I have a question. So these are those lots out in Industrial Park that we stated we were going to sell off, and if they don't build after a certain amount of time, then,
Yes, correct.
Okay,
So
okay.
this just hadn't got to the part where they actually
Okay.
closed on the property, so it's still in our name.
oh, it is, and
Yeah.
they're just not going to purchase it?
Correct,
All
yeah.
right, I move approval.
Going forward, I'd like to really discuss the earnest money portion of this. Sure. So I think since they decided to stay within Grand Forks, and I think it's great that they found a building locally, and we're happy they're doing that. But, you know, in kind of good faith, I think we should return their earnest money to them, and I want to bring that to the board.
I guess I would disagree, as our staff have racked up fees putting this purchase agreement into place. We've spent money on attorney fees. We have spent money on other city entities, and so I disagree with returning their earnest money. They entered into it. We are letting them out of their contract. That's the price that they pay for doing that. Now, we have to go through, we're going to have to sell the lot to someone else, acquire more fees, and so I disagree with that 100%.
Mr. Chair. So this poses a philosophical conundrum for me. I think to Ms. Sosowski's point, and from like the business side, I mean, this is what we do. You know, I can see the perspective from the seller, you know, trying to retain buyer defaults, basing under the assumption at least that we've abided by the contract as well, all the deliverables and whatnot based on the contract. So making that assumption, if the buyer is in default, I understand the language in the contract. I do. The philosophical conundrum I have is that we are the growth fund. The purpose of our committee is to promote growth, and I mean, by definition, you know, being as business friendly as possible. And so whether it's this specific one here or moving forward, I think language should be adopted that, you know, if there's hard costs incurred, or maybe there's a due diligence period that's understood, so then all parties know, or maybe there's a clause that if, you know, you find something else in town. I mean, we want to promote businesses and business growth and buying property and establishing roots here, a physical, real presence. And so for them executing that on the growth fund side, I think they accomplished the mission of, you know, that we would set out to do. If it's not on the piece of dirt that the city owns, that's okay. It's real estate here. If they were to go to a different community, totally different conversation we're having. And so I think I just have a little philosophical conundrum there, because I want to support the business community in that growth, but the way the language is currently does state that. And so maybe there's language in there, and that's the challenge when you have a you know, political or the city being involved in business, right? Is that you're going to incur costs, and so that's kind of the risk that you take as the city diving into private business of land ownership and sales. And so I guess that's just kind of, I'm just airing all that out there, that regardless of what the body, the committee decides on this specifically, I'd like to see just and city staff did what they're supposed to. I mean, you went by the language of the PA. I just think that we should maybe consider that more, since the role that we have as a city to encourage business development and ownership in our community. So I just want to kind of throw it out there and see what everybody else has as discussion.
I guess I have another question. Did they actually request their money back? Because is it in what we were presented today that they requested their earnest money back?
Yeah, they had requested, that was the initial conversation, and then when we went through and looked at the purchase agreement, it was really determined that we saw it as being, that it should reside with us. And this is, you know, I can understand the difficult position, right? It's you know, this is a public entity, but at the same time, it is our business arm. So that's kind of why our recommendation, you're certainly able to make a different determination and really kind of leave it to you on the political side of whether that recommendation up to JDA is to return that or not. But that's kind of where we left it. We didn't see that we had much choice in looking at the purchase agreement. But if there is a different determination, that's always, that is something that could be looked at.
I mean, I do respect your opinion, and maybe we should look at it further, but I mean, the agreement that they entered into, they were well aware that this would happen. And so I do think that the city needs to be ran like a business. We cannot just throw away, hours worked and throw taxpayer funds down the drain. This was the agreement that they signed on to. They are aware of the consequences. And so I don't think we should be making special decisions based on this. That's great that they're staying in town, but they entered into an agreement with us, and I think that we should keep the earnest money. If we want to change that going forward, that is something that us as a committee should look at, but this is the agreement that they signed on to.
You have something else?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's a challenging position to be in, but I think I would look at it for future contracts versus this one. And I think we should look into that to being friendly to business. But at this point, I think I would agree that the earnest money should stay with the city, given that that's what this particular contract does state. And just reviewing, now, I'm not an attorney, so please don't think that I can completely see legalese, but that would be, I think we should definitely consider it for future contracts as something of, some difference in how we word that and look into that as we move forward.
So Ms. Ossowski has made a motion, and I will second that motion.
All right, so this would approve the Kringle Investments purchase agreement termination with the staff recommendations. All right, seeing no more discussion, this motion, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign?
Aye.
This motion passes. Thank
Move
you.
adjournment.
All right, first.
Second.
All right, first from Wazowski, second from Wolf, and we are adjourned.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks. This is Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, November 12th. Under item 1, call to order 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Osowski. Here. Berg.
Here.
Lunsky.
Here.
Friedolfs.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
And Veen. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Under informational items, 2.1, the presentation of the Grand Valley Pedestrian Crossing Study. Good evening.
Perfect. Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. Members of the council, President Sandy. So I'm Tyler Mansky. I'm with the Forks MPO. You have seen this before. There was an informational item regarding the Grand Valley Pedestrian Crossing Study. It takes a look at the south end of town. It's more of a visionary, very high-level planning document. A lot of the value that you're going to see that we provided from the study comes from all of the different stakeholders that we've met with over time. We've had 5 stakeholder meetings so far. We're going to have one more before the study wraps up. But they come from a huge diverse background. So we have city planning, engineering, Grand Forks Parks and Schools, Riverside Christian School that may or may not be going up in that area, and including the Board of Realtors as well. So a lot of really good feedback. You gave us some great feedback last time, and we're looking for some more as we approach the final document here. And I'm going to turn it over to Blue and Connor from Bolton and Mink, and they can present a little bit more.
Mr. Weber, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. And Tyler took all my information, so I'm basically just going to be really fast. So Connor, if you want to jump to the next slide right away. Just a little overview of what we're here to talk about, kind of the process, the project itself, kind of where we're at, and what to expect in the next little bit. So Connor, you can jump to the next slide. Like Tyler said, this is a very high-level planning study. So this is not something that we don't have firm engineering numbers right here. It's really just meant to be visionary and kind of looking at what is potential in this area. Just a reminder on what this area is, all the way from Columbia up to Washington, as well as a section of Belmont, or Columbia all the way to Belmont, and then 47th all the way down to 62nd, and 12th is the very south end border of that. So looking at that area, a lot of it is greenfield, which is awesome. It's such a good thing to see both the city and the MPO kind of stepping up to these greenfield areas and saying, okay, how do we start to lay this out and make sure that it's going to be best for the entire community? Connor, you can jump to our next slide. Just a little bit of an overview on some of the things that we've done thus far. So we've had these monthly steering committee meetings. So both the city planning department and city engineering department sit on this. And so it's so beneficial for us to have these monthly check-ins and monthly talks through these different conversations. These can be everything from conversations around what these streets look like, but also what the process looks like when it comes to that public engagement, and having both Ms. Edwardson and Mr. Karanko on that steering committee have been extremely helpful. We have had a number of these local government presentations. So we were here back in July. We're here today, and then we presented at Planning and Zoning both last night or last week and in August. We will be sending out to both you and the P&Z kind of the rough draft of the final report once we're wrapping up with this at the end of the month. So some of the different stakeholder engagements that we've done, we held these amazing interviews with a couple different stakeholders. This was with the school district. It was with existing businesses out in that area. It was with some of the developers in that area. Probably one of my favorite things was we were stationed out at Sweetwaters out on the south end of town, and Phil Giese actually came and talked to us, not by planning, just by the fact that he was walking through. And so we got to have a 15-minute conversation with Mr. Giese on that as well. And then we did a pop-up over at the Full Steam Ahead. This was really intended to just have some conversations with parents. What are the kinds of crossings that they want to see? What are some of the elements? And then we also held some listening sessions. Those are going to be at the end of this month with both Discovery and with South Middle School as well. So that is our stakeholder engagement up until now. I'll let Connor jump onto the next slide and take over.
All right, great. Hi, everybody. You may remember me from a few months ago when we presented, but just a quick intro. Again, I'm Connor Cox. I'm a transportation planner with Bolton and Mink and serving as the project manager for this study. Just wanted to give a quick kind of recap of our project process so you can get a sense of what we have done up to this point. where we're at right now in the process, and then kind of the last couple things that we have before the study ends. So we started out this process in the beginning, kind of the summertime. So it's about a 6-month study. It's a very quick turnaround for a kind of typical planning study like this. Blue mentioned some of the work that we've been doing with engaging different stakeholders and community members. That a large part of that was that steering committee that we've been engaging with and that have been meeting every month. Through that work, we've really been able to identify a lot of the issues and concerns in the study area and start to identify priority locations that we should be focusing on. So I'll be presenting a little bit more about that in a bit here, but we've identified a few different locations, both intersections and corridors that we view as really important for the future of the study area, with that lens towards pedestrian safety and mobility. That brings us to the November and December timeframe here, towards the end of the project. So we've been working on developing some conceptual design options for those top priority corridors, and I'll share those with you today. And then moving forward here over the next month and a half, we'll be wrapping up the report at the project, I should say, at the end of the year. We will have a draft report completed at the end of the month, and as Blue mentioned, we'll be sharing that with this entire group so that we can gather additional feedback on the draft report, and then we'll also be sharing it with, of course, our steering committee, as well as the planning and zoning committee that we've met with a couple times as well. So I wanted to just highlight the focus areas that we have been kind of diving into a little bit deeper. So the previous, one of the steering committee meetings that we had back in October, we had an exercise where we had a discussion with the group and really asked them to help us identify what do you see as the most important corridors in the study area. Recognizing that this is an area that will be growing quickly over the coming years and decades. And the three locations that really rose to the top were 62nd Avenue South between Washington and, we'll call it Belmont to the east, Cherry or Belmont. We're kind of looking at that entire stretch east of Washington. And then Washington Street from 57th to the south. So essentially, if you can envision that area, the Washington was reconstructed up to about 57th, and so we are looking at that stretch to the south and starting to look at some different design options for that area. And then obviously the intersection of those two corridors is also really important, so we've been looking at some different design options for the intersection of 62nd and Washington, and I will share those with you in a little bit here. Just recap, a lot of the goals that we identified for the study that the steering committee helped us craft and identify really focus on pedestrian safety. That's really the underlying impetus for this study is how can we design streets and corridors and intersections to be safer for people walking or biking or rolling with a wheelchair or any sort of assisted mobility device. And so that's kind of the really the impetus for this study. And before we get into the sharing some of the concepts, I just kind of wanted to frame the conversation around there's always trade-offs between vehicle mobility when you're talking about moving as many vehicles as possible, or throughput as we call it, with pedestrian safety and really trying to get vehicles to slow down to safer speeds and prioritize pedestrian safety. So there's always a balance there between those two things, and that's something that we're trying to strike that balance in this study, is making sure that we're planning for the future, recognizing that there will be a lot of traffic growth in this area due to new development that's coming in, but at the same time, really trying to emphasize pedestrian safety and mobility to ensure that this is an area where folks can, walk easily and safely, or kids can go to school without, worrying about their safety. So just wanted to kind of frame the context before we get into things. I'll start with the first kind of priority focus area, which is 62nd Avenue South. As Blue mentioned in kind of his introduction there have been discussions about a potential school siting location near 62nd and Cherry. Of course, that's far from final, but I think that is one of the key reasons why 62nd Avenue was prioritized amongst the steering committee. If there is a future school along this corridor, that really elevates the importance of safety, knowing that this could be a street where we have young kids that are, either walking or biking to school. We want to make sure that we design it from the beginning to ensure safety for that potential user group. So what we've done, and I'll show you in a bit here, we've developed a number of different conceptual design options, and some of those include 2 lanes and some of them include 3 lanes, which means 1 lane in each direction plus a center turn lane. What we're showing in this presentation is just typical cross sections. In other words, it's kind of a slice down the middle of the road and kind of looking at it from that perspective. We are also, we've also developed what we call concept layouts, which is essentially like a plan view, kind of top-down view of the corridor in 2 dimensions. That's something that's difficult to share on a PowerPoint presentation, so we aren't sharing those here, but we will have that in the draft report. So I just wanted to mention that. Before I get into the details of the different cross-section options, I just wanted to mention that, as both, I think Blue and Tyler had mentioned, that this is a planning study, so it's a little bit more high level. We're not getting too deep into the weeds on different dimensions of lane widths or, boulevard widths, those types of things. These graphics do have dimensions on them, but just know that that is very flexible. Those dimensions can change, and so I don't want to get too hung up on those types of things, and rather would get the group's feedback on some of the bigger picture things like the number of lanes that different options have, or whether there's a median present, or whether there's a trail or a sidewalk, those types of things. Some of those further engineering details will be worked out in the future as projects come up. With that in mind, I'm going to just run through the different options. So for 62nd, we developed a number of different options, and I'm going to kind of share these from what I'll call like the narrowest corridor first up to kind of the widest corridor. So this first option here shows 2 lanes for motor vehicles, 1 in each direction, eastbound and westbound, with what we would consider kind of the narrowest shoulder that's recommended for a corridor. And all of these options have trails shown on both sides. Now, that's something that is also flexible. We could show this as a sidewalk on one side of the street and a trail on the other side of the street. We recognize that there are budget implications to developing a 10-foot trail versus a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk. So just know that there's some flexibility there, and those are all things that we're taking feedback on and considering. The next option is also a 2-lane roadway, but just adding a wider shoulder on one side of the street. That shoulder could also be used for parking, or in this case, if a school is developed, that could be used for a drop-off area or pickup area or busing, that sort of thing. And then an additional option is looking at a 2-lane cross section that has parking or shoulders on both sides. And then we get into the 3-lane options on 62nd. So in this case, this is about the narrowest 3-lane section that we would look at. Does not have shoulders. Now, the second option for a 3-lane does provide a shoulder or a parking lane on one side. And then lastly, we're looking at a 3-lane section that has parking or shoulders on both sides. And we'll take maybe some time at the end of this and we can have discussions about these different options. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move on and show some of the options that we're considering for Washington. So as a reminder, the segment that we're looking at is kind of from 57th and then all the way to the south. So we've looked at a number of different options, including options with 2 lanes, 3 lanes, or 4 lanes. Before we get into the different options, I just want to kind of summarize the existing conditions that are out there on Washington Street today. Not in the area that I showed on the map, but this is kind of the existing cross-section for most of Washington Street that's either in the northern part of our study area or to the north of our study area. So generally speaking, it's a 4-lane divided cross-section, which means there's a median in the middle of the street. there are trails on both sides of the road, and the boulevard width varies. It's quite wide in the middle of the block, and then the trail sort of bends in at the intersection. One of the things I wanted to just note about the existing conditions on a lot of Washington Street is that due to the width of that center median, it's quite wide. It creates a long pedestrian crossing distance. So generally speaking, the longer the distance it is for a pedestrian to cross the street, the less comfortable and safe it is, just because they're exposed for longer periods of time. This is an example of Washington Street at the intersection of 48th. So it's, I think, a good visual example of the distance required to cross that street. It can feel a little bit uncomfortable for a pedestrian crossing the street there, despite having the flashing RRFB signs there. So it's something that we're thinking about. Can we look at different alternatives in the study area further to the south to make it feel more safe and comfortable and inviting for pedestrians while still managing vehicle throughput? So I'll start going through these different options in Washington. So the first option is looking at a 2-lane divided cross-section. So similar to existing, there's a median in the middle here and 8-foot shoulders on each side. The next option is looking at a 3-lane section. So again, we provide that trail on both sides of the street, just like there is today. In this case, there's that center turn lane that would run the entire length of the corridor, and then drive lanes in each direction. And then the last option would be more similar to what's out there today, in that it's a 4-lane, divided roadway. In this case, both the center median and the boulevard widths are a little bit narrower, so that helps kind of reduce that crossing distance for pedestrians. And moving on, I want to talk a little bit about the intersection of 62nd and Washington. One thing that I'll mention from the onset is that the type of intersection that it ultimately ends up being recommended as a preferred concept here is largely driven by the recommendations for each of those corridors. So, depending on what the feedback that we receive from this group, from our steering committee and planning and zoning, we hope to come to a preferred concept on both of the corridors, and those decisions will influence what ultimately should happen at this intersection, because the roadway configuration of those two roads has a direct influence on the design of the intersection. But with that being said, we looked at a few different design options. So the first one being a traditional signalized intersection, much like you might see on several of the other intersections on South Washington to the north of our study area. We also looked at the option of a single-lane roundabout, as well as a multi-lane roundabout. And I'll show both of those options here in just a minute. This is just an image of the existing intersection today. As you can see, it's side stop controlled. There's a stop sign on 62nd, but not on Washington. And it's just 2 lanes in each direction with kind of a rural cross section. So no curb and gutter and no trail facilities. This first option that we're showing here is more of the traditional signalized intersection. So just to clarify, what you're looking at here would be 62nd running east and west, and then 62nd running kind of the left and right there, and then Washington on the other direction. So we're providing trail crossings at each of the intersections with crosswalk markings. And then looking at the single lane roundabout. So again, if a 4-lane cross section were to move forward on Washington, this option would not work because it's showing a single lane coming into that roundabout. This would only work if it was either a 2 or a 3-lane section on both of those legs. But I think there are a lot of benefits of a roundabout. Naturally has a traffic calming feature. It gets vehicles to slow down when they're approaching the intersection. And these can be designed to accommodate the truck turning movements as well. We know that this is Washington is a truck route, and there are a number of trucks or large vehicles that use it, and we expect that to continue in the future. So whatever intersection design is recommended, we need to make sure that it accommodates trucks and other large vehicles. And then the third and final option being reviewed at this intersection is a multi-lane roundabout. So again, if a 4-lane section is recommended on Washington, then you would need to have that multi-lane roundabout in order to accommodate that design. So we'll have an opportunity to discuss all of those in just a bit here, but I just wanted to share our next steps. So for the project, we have one final meeting with our steering committee in December. We'll be going through the draft report and getting feedback from the group on our report findings. As Blue mentioned earlier, we have meetings with the PTO set up for later this month. And then, again, just continuing to work on that draft report, which will be available for review in a couple of weeks here, at the end of next week. So with that, I think we can open it up to any discussion or conversation. Thanks for allowing us to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Linsky?
Do you have any numbers of how many stakeholders or interviews you had at the pop-up or the...
As far as individual conversations, no. We had 22 people fill out the actual surveys, which were little paper surveys. But I would probably put it somewhere around the 50 to 60 conversations. We had the 10 interviews, as well as one with Councilman Friedolfs as well.
And how about at the Full Steam Ahead event?
That's what I mean, is there was about, I would say probably around 60 conversations. It was more, some people were there with their kids running around, and so not wanting to fill out the survey. So it was just more conversation-based in that sense. So it is, a lot of that input is put into the survey, into the engagement summary at the end.
And then can you go back to slide 9?
Connor can, I can't.
So just one concern I had, the white lines painted on the side. I know Grand Forks, possibly 6 months out of the year, we can't always see the lines because of winter. And I just see like something like this, they just become very wide lanes where people seem to travel much faster.
So my one point on that, and not to say that that's not good input, like Connor said, these kind of renderings are really meant to just be high level, kind of show the idea of what a 2-lane section could look like in that area and things like that. So a lot of those would be more things that we would start to address once it goes into kind of the design phase. But it is important to note that, yeah, it can be difficult to see those areas.
Gotcha.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
Further comments or questions? Yes?
I think it'll
Ms.
be,
Burke?
yes. I think it'll be important to know if the school is going to be built there or not, because looking to control the traffic speed as well as pedestrian safety, that'll be important to.
Kind of an anecdote to that. One of the points in this project, I was out taking photos of the different areas. It's the fun part of my job, is that I get to go around and go into our own town. And I was actually at the intersection of 48th and Washington, and a woman pulled over and was chatting with me about how much her kids, she lives on the east side of Washington, and how many of her kids are going over to the west side of Washington to play soccer and things like that. So I think even though it's really important to note whatever happens with the school, people are still going to be crossing Washington at anywhere and any time. And so it's an important aspect of the study is that we should be looking at crossings for all users, regardless of if they're students or not. Sorry.
Further comments or Mr. Friedel? Yes, sir.
Not sure. How many multi-lane roundabouts are there in Grand Forks?
There's none in Grand Forks. We did look at one good example of a multi-lane that's down in Fargo on Main, right outside of downtown, near the border of Moorhead and Fargo. It's a multi-lane that handles, I don't remember the amount of traffic, but it was one that we looked at as an example.
Okay. Yeah, because since this is my ward, I'm there a lot, and that corner is nuts. I mean, people go way faster than they should down Washington. So I think something that controls the speed is definitely a good idea. So, thank you.
I don't think the potato trucks would appreciate that, but who knows? Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, thank you very much. Mr.
Thank you very
Weber
much.
And MPO team, appreciate it. Moving right along, discussion items 3.1, Ren Zone Lease Incentive, Franklin on 4th. Anyone have an issue approving the Renaissance Zone?
Move approval.
Moved by Osowski, second by Berg. Further comments? Yes? Ms. Lensky?
So we're just approving the same thing we approved for the other tenants?
Yes?
Yeah, perfect.
They have to bring every lease to us, so it's the same concept. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.2, lease renewal request, U.S. Army Reserve Center. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Chair Sandy and members of the committee. A lot of people don't realize there's an Army Reserve Center that's just south of the Public Works Building. It's on city land. It's under a $1 a lease. Was put into place in 1974 as a 50-year lease, and despite what my staff says, I was not here working at that time. But it is time for it to be up for renewal, and we are recommending approval.
I move approval.
Motion by Osowski, second by Lensky. Why don't they purchase the land? Why did they lease it from the city?
I believe that that's the same way the National Guard piece is as well. I think this is their, what they typically do throughout is they don't own the land, just the building itself.
Sure, because they don't want to pay property taxes.
They don't, yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.3, amendment to City Code, Section 9-0404 relating to times gaming is allowed. Ms. Lensky. Not Ms. Lensky. Yes, Ms. Lensky, thank you.
President Sandy, members of the committee.
Ms. Lundmark, sorry.
It's
thank
okay.
you.
I knew who you meant. This is a kind of a code cleanup item. The state, at some point in time, they set the rules for when gaming can occur. They also have in Century Code when alcohol can be served. The alcohol has to be, on-sale alcohol has to occur in order for gaming to be allowed at a site. And at some point in time, we have always updated our alcohol times as the state made changes. Starting in 2009, when they allowed on sale on Thanksgiving Day, we did not also update our gaming code to allow gaming to occur. And then in 2021, when they passed several different things related to alcohol service, we did not move the time from 11 a.m. on Sundays up to 8 a.m. on Sundays in our gaming code, even though we updated it in alcohol. So that's come with some, we're the only city apparently that does not have the same as the state. And so it's caused some confusion for customers, for establishment owners, for gaming operators. And so just looking to clean this up and make us consistent with the state on the gaming as well.
I move approval.
Moved by Osowski, second by Berg. Further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 3.4, appointments, reappointments to Grand Forks Event Center Commission, Jared Spoor, and Airport Authority, Tony Hodney. Questions or comments about
I move
those?
approval.
Moved by Osowski, second by Friedolfs. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. 3.5, plans and specs, project 8833, District 226, street lighting on 4th Avenue South from Cottonwood to 3rd Street South and Lincoln Drive, Belmont Road to the football. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. So just a quick recap on this project. 4th Avenue South corridor was identified as lighting improvements for that, the Belmont Phoenix Elementary study. So this would include installing approximately 13 commercial streetlights on 4th Avenue South, as well as we included Lincoln Drive as this. It was identified earlier on as another area that could use lighting. Those would be residential streetlights. We had a public input meeting for this on November 7th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. We had one attendee for that with the overall, he was all overall for the project. We also, engineering's also looking at implementing some new online surveys to try to increase public input for our projects. So this was kind of a trial project to try that. We had 3 online respondents to that. And details of that I sent out to you guys this morning in that brief. Again, approximate estimated cost for this project is $360,000, with city share being $288,000 with an 80-20 split. This would be a 2025 construction project and be completed in 2025 as well.
I have a question, Mr. Sandy. These aren't like the fancy downtown streetlights, correct? These are just normal,
No, they would be the standard, Lincoln Drive would be our standard residential lighting.
yeah, they're just standard ones, not like the fancy ones we have, those pillar ones?
Correct.
They're not
They won't be
there.
the ornamentals, they'll be our standard
Okay.
city residential lights on Lincoln Drive. 4th Avenue South will be our 30-foot commercial poles. They'll look the same as the ones
I
on
move
Belmont.
approval.
Better.
Moved by Osowski. There's second by Friedolf. Thank you. Further comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign.
Thank you.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Hallweger. Item 4 is council member comments. Ms. Osowski, anything for the good of the order tonight?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Ms. Berg?
No, thank you.
Ms. Linsky? Ms. Friedolf? Mr. Weigel online?
No, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Is there a motion
I
to
move
adjourn by
adjournment.
Osowski, second by Berg? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you. Good meeting.